All right, buckle up because today we are diving headfirst into some seriously big questions, the kind that keep philosophers and computer scientists up at night.
We're talking about minds and machines.
And trust me, this is going to be a wild ride. We're talking about Turing machines, the limits of what computers can do, and whether a computer could ever truly, think.
And we've got a fantastic guide for our deep dive today. Scott Aronson's PHYS 771 lectures, specifically Lecture 4 on minds and machines.
Aronson always brings the goods, and this lecture is no exception. It's jam-packed with mind-bending concepts.
But don't worry, we're here to break it down, cut through the jargon, and pull out the most fascinating insights.
Exactly. So to kick things off, Aronson starts with this idea of a Turing machine, which, and bear with me here, is kind of like the blueprint for every computer ever built.
It's a theoretical model, but it captures the essence of computation no matter how simple or complex.
So are we saying that this Turing machine thing can help us understand, like, the limits of what any computer could ever do, even in the future?
Exactly. The Turing machine gives us this framework for thinking about problems in terms of their, well, computability. Some problems are easy for a computer to chomp on, others are much, much harder, and then there are those that are flat out impossible to compute no matter how powerful your machine gets.
Okay, so even with, like, infinite computing power, there are still things we can't figure out. My brain already hurts.
And to make things even wilder, Aronson introduces this concept of oracles.
Orwells, like those mystical beings who give cryptic prophecies. Are we about to summon some ancient wisdom here?
Not quite. Think of an oracle in this context as, a superpower for our Turing machine. It's like having access to a supercharged Google search that can instantly answer any question about a program's behavior. Will it run forever, or will it eventually stop?
Handy. So even with an oracle on our side, there are still limits.
Precisely. Even if we had an oracle for the infamous halting problem, that's the one about figuring out if a program will ever finish running or get stuck in an endless loop, there are still problems so mind-bogglingly complex that they remain unsolvable, even for a Turing machine with an oracle.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this stuff keeps people up at night. It's like there's this whole hidden hierarchy of problem difficulty that we're just beginning to grasp.
And get this, for over half a century, mathematicians have been on the hunt for a special kind of problem, one that falls somewhere in between the super easy and the utterly impossible.
Like the in-betweeners of the computational world.
Exactly. Finding a natural problem of that intermediate difficulty, one that's not just a made-up mathematical puzzle, could revolutionize fields like cryptography
Right.
and completely change how we understand computational complexity. Be huge.
It's like searching for a missing link in the evolutionary tree of, well, computational problems, I guess you could say.
And the fact that it's been over 50 years and we still haven't found one just goes to show how much we still don't know about the true nature of computation.
So we've got these Turing machines, these problems that make my head spin just thinking about them, and this ongoing search for the in-betweeners of the computational world.
It really makes you appreciate the elegance and the sheer complexity of computation, doesn't it? And it leads us to something even more profound.
Oh.
Well, we've been talking about what computers can do, but what about the question of intelligence itself?
Okay, yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? If a computer can play chess like a grandmaster, or write a symphony that brings you to tears, does that mean it actually understands what it's doing?
Right. Or is it just really, really good at following instructions, like a super sophisticated algorithm?
And this is where our friend Alan Turing comes in, right? Back in 1950, he was already wrestling with this idea of whether machines could think.
He even had a name for the bias we have against the idea of artificial intelligence. He called it meat chauvinism.
Meat chauvinism. Okay, I gotta admit, that's a new one for me.
Basically, Turing argued that just because something isn't made of flesh and blood doesn't mean it can't be intelligent. He was challenging the assumption that our way of thinking, with our biological brains is the only possible way to experience consciousness or understanding.
It's like saying, hey, maybe we're not so special after all.
Exactly. And if we just dismiss the intelligence of a machine that can, say, hold a conversation about Shakespeare, are we dismissing the intelligence of anything that doesn't happen to be human?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So, how do we even begin to test for something as slippery as intelligence in a machine?
Well, Turing proposed a thought experiment that's now legendary, the Turing Test.
Ah, yes, the Turing test. If you can't tell if you're talking to a human or a machine, then maybe, just maybe, the machine is intelligent enough to be considered thinking.
And what's remarkable is how relevant the Turing test remains even today. I mean, think about the chatbots we interact with daily. Some of them are getting incredibly sophisticated.
You're telling me. I've had conversations with customer service bots and completely forgotten I wasn't talking to a real person. It's both impressive and, I'll admit it, a little creepy.
Right. It really makes you think about the nature of communication
Yeah.
and what it even means to understand something.
Speaking of creepy, Aronson mentions this early program called ELIZA, created back in the 1960s. It was designed to simulate a psychotherapist.
Oh, yeah, Eliza. People would pour their hearts out to this program, telling it their deepest fears, their dreams, their relationship problems.
And ELIZA's responses were,
Basically, just cleverly programmed variations of what the person typed to it, like a mirror reflecting back your own words.
wait, seriously? And people didn't catch on that they were just interacting with a computer program.
Nope. Some people were utterly convinced that they were talking to a real, empathetic therapist. It's amazing how easily we project our own interpretations onto technology, especially when it seems to understand us.
It's both fascinating and a little unsettling. But it makes you think even if a machine can perform a task amazingly well, like beat a chess grandmaster or write a poem that moves you, does that mean it truly grasps the concepts behind those achievements?
Now you're getting to the heart of it. And that's where another famous thought experiment comes in John Searle's Chinese room.
The Chinese room, right. Okay, so remind me again how this thought experiment works, because it always seems to tie my brain in knots.
Well, imagine you're stuck in a room and you don't understand a single word of Chinese.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
But you've got this massive rule book written in English that tells you how to respond to Chinese characters. Characters get passed into the room, you look them up in your trusty rule book, and you send back different characters based on what the rule book says. You're basically a pen pal who's just matching symbols without any clue what they mean.
Right, like a super complicated code you're deciphering without actually understanding the language. And the big question is, even if someone outside the room thinks they're having a deep philosophical conversation with you in Chinese.
Is there any real understanding happening inside the room?
Exactly.
And Searle's argument is a resounding no. The person in the room is just manipulating symbols according to the rules. They don't actually understand Chinese. And so, by extension, a computer running a program, even a super complex one, isn't really understanding either. It's just following instructions.
Okay, I get that, but here's where my brain starts to push back a little. What if we make that rule book the size of, like, the entire Earth? And our person in the room can access any part of it instantly, making connections at lightning speed, connections no human could ever grasp. Does it still feel like just following rules at that point?
That's a really interesting question. And it brings up this whole debate about emergent properties. Could a system, even if its individual parts aren't conscious, still give rise to consciousness or understanding at a higher level? Makes you think about those mesmerizing ant colonies.
Right. Where a single ant might not seem capable of much on its own.
But together they can build these elaborate structures, navigate complex mazes, even make what look like group decisions.
It's like no single ant is in charge, but something intelligent is definitely happening.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, if something as vast and interconnected as the human brain can produce consciousness, what about a system as complex and constantly evolving as, say, the internet?
Whoa, okay, now that is a thought. The internet is a giant emergent consciousness. But it also brings us back to that fundamental mystery. How do we even define consciousness? How can we ever be sure that a machine, or even another person for that matter, truly experiences the world in the same way we do?
It's the hard problem of consciousness, as David Chalmers so eloquently put it. We just take it for granted that other people experience the world in a way that's somewhat analogous to our own. But when it comes to machines, well, we're a lot more hesitant to grant them that same benefit of the doubt.
Even if they can't ace the Turing test, right?
It all circles back to Turing's point about meat chauvinism. We tend to think that our way of experiencing the world is somehow inherently special. But what if it's just one possibility among many?
So, where does that leave us? Are we on the verge of creating artificial intelligence that truly rivals our own?
Yep.
Or are there some fundamental limits we can't overcome no matter how powerful our computers get?
If this deep dive has taught us anything, it's that the line between minds and machines is anything but clear-cut.
It's enough to make your head spin.
We've been grappling with some of the biggest, most mind-bending questions out there about computation, consciousness, the very nature of understanding. And it's a journey that doesn't really have an endpoint.
So, to our listeners, we leave you with this Keep those questions coming, keep those thought experiments going. Maybe you'll be the one to crack the code of consciousness or discover that elusive natural problem that unlocks a whole new level of computational understanding. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the frontiers of computation and consciousness. Until next time.